Welcome back, everyone. This is Ayad Boudiab, and we are proceeding with our Angular course. In today's discussion, I'd like to talk about built-in services. We've talked about services before and how we can create those services using factory, service, and provider. And after that, we moved into some of the built-in services, and we are proceeding with these discussions today. Specifically, today I'd like to talk about the sanitize, so we can replace some dangerous characters in HTML with their escape values. So I'm going to create a small example, and I'm going to show you how we can display that data, and then I'm going to show you how we can use sanitize, and then I'm going to also describe to you how you can display those dangerous data if you really want to display them. So when we talk about data that they're dangerous, we're talking about the ability to for the user to, let's say he's filling out a form, to type in some HTML and type in some scripts within that so they can steal data or they can redirect the form data somewhere else. Okay, so they pretty much have a control of the data simply by, let's say you have a text box or you have a text area where the user is going to give in some comments. Instead of typing in the real text, they just type in code, JavaScript code that would run and actually take control of stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with a small example and try to illustrate how we can display that data, and then move on with the sanitize. So and by the way, also in addition to sanitize, Angular comes with a feature called the strict contextual escaping. That's the SCE. That's also a service provided to us. So it'll be $SCE that can also remove dangerous elements from the and attributes from the HTML. So let's go ahead and get started with our example. First of all, as you can see, I have an empty page right now, and we're referencing AngularJS. I'm going to build some scripts over here, and then I put some text within the body. But since I need some styling just to display the full text box that takes over the whole screen, I'm going to add some Bootstrap. Okay, and I have Bootstrap in a styles folder. So in this case here, I'm going to add the actual styles. So link and href equals, and as I said, it is in the styles folder, so that will be styles and then slash bootstrap and then .min .css. The reason it's min because it's the minified version, which is a smaller version of the file. That way it downloads faster, and this is a style sheet. Okay, and the second one, I don't think I'm going to do some theming in here, but just in case I did, let me go ahead and copy the second link, which is the bootstrap theme min.css. Okay, so by the way, this is just to illustrate to you that you can always style your data using the bootstrap, right? And you reference that in here using the href and the link tag. So now that's that. Let's go ahead and start with the script, right? So inside the script, I'm going to create a module, and remember in here it's built-in service app. That's what I'm going to name it. So I'm going to say Angular .module, and in here I'm going to give it the module name. This is the built-in service app, and this one right now does not depend on anything, right? So I'm going to leave that empty, and then I'm going to say .controller to add the controller, and let's name this one pretty much the same thing. So let's go built-in controller. Okay, and then this controller will have a function, and then this function depends on the scope. I'm going to inject the scope, right? And don't forget to close. Well, I don't want to close the parenthesis here because I need the function, but I'm going to close the parenthesis there. Okay, so then this is the body of the function. I have the controller, built-in controller with the function scope. Okay, now scrolling down here to the text, I'm going to add a div, and then I'm going to use my ng controller, and then that will be equal to the controller that I declared here, right? And by the way, this is double L. That's why I'd like to copy paste so I don't make mistakes typing. So that'll be the controller that I just used up there, and then that div is closed down here. Inside the div, I'm going to add a couple paragraphs. So this is the first one. This is the second one. In here, inside the first one, I'm going to put an input box, and I'll show you that why I need that later. But I'm going to give that input box, that's the reason I'm using the CSS or the bootstrap, is to give it the class to be form control. Okay, I'll be back to this one in a second. I need to show you something else. But in here, you see the scope that's part of the controller in here that we're injecting. I'm going to add something to the scope. So $scope dot data equal something. And this is why inside this paragraph here, I'm going to bind to that data. Okay, so I'm going to display that data here. Now you guessed it, at this stage I'm going to display some what we call the dangerous data that I've been referring to, right? So inside here then I'm going to create a paragraph, and I'm going to close the paragraph, and then I'm going to say in here that this is the test data that you asked for, right? This is the test data that you asked for. Okay, now right now there's nothing weird about that, but what else I'm going to do is inside here for the test data, I'm going to put that in a underline. So wrap the test data with underline, and then inside the underline I'm going to do on mouse over. Okay, and make that equal to an alert. And obviously in here I'm not putting any dangerous data, but this is where the dangerous data would go, right? So I'm just saying here testing, and that supposedly will just display the alert, right? But this is pretty much where you can do a lot of stuff in here. So when the user say if it is an actual link, you click on it and does stuff, or you can just put in some more dangerous data. So in this case then I'm just putting an alert in there. Okay, so this is basically the data that I have, and it's being displayed down here. So we have our controller. The controller is in the ng controller with a div, and then I have an input box in here that I'll be back to later, and then I have in here the actual data that we're binding to, and that data is a paragraph, closing paragraph, and then it says this is the test data that you asked for, and then in here I have on mouse over to display an alert. Okay, let's go ahead and save this and right click and open in browser. Okay, and you see the input box in here, there's nothing in it, right? And it's taking out the whole page, and that's pretty much bootstrap, right? And in this case you see that it says P, this is the, and so on. So what happened, right? I supposedly in here created some HTML with some JavaScript, and I was hoping that I can basically do something here, mouse over the test data and display an alert, but that didn't happen, right? Well, this is the part that's provided to you automatically by Angular. This is the illustration. That's the key point that I'm trying to illustrate to you in this video. It's pretty much that this security thing through the script, the strict contextual escaping or SCE, this is pretty much provided to you by default. So whenever Angular sees this, what we call the dangerous data, right, the tags and so on, these tags are being replaced. right? So the characters less than, greater than, and so on, they've been escaped. So you don't see the actual HTML being interpreted. Okay, so that's the key part that I'm trying to talk about. Now the other thing is, if you go back to the input in here, input box, what else we can do is we can say ng model equals, and in here I can put the data, right? So this is pretty much the data that the user would see, and here's the actual information that the user will go in and type all of that stuff in there, and then just make it try to make it happen and provide you some dangerous data, so when you submit your form all the bad stuff would take place. Okay, so this is something important that you need to be careful about when you're working with dangerous data. But the good thing is that Angular already escaped these characters for you, and it will not display HTML, and it will not run JavaScript unless you really want to, and I will show you how you can do that later, but this is pretty much a very rare case when you need that to happen. Okay, so this is basically how we can work with that. But then the other option is how I can use sanitize, right? I referred to that at the beginning of the video, and this is one thing you can do, which is basically sanitizing the data. And the way you do this is basically by using the one of the binding, which is the ng bind HTML, and I'm going to refer to the Angular website, and here under the download, when you click on download, you obviously in here you're trying to download Angular, but you browse to additional modules. On the additional modules section, you download sanitize, Angular sanitize. As you see in here, I already downloaded that, but I don't need it. But you can always right click and say save link as, and then you save it wherever you want to. I already downloaded that, so I don't need it. I'm going to go back to the page, and here is my script, and then after that I'm going to do Angular dash sanitize. This is the Angular sanitize that I'm trying to refer to. That's the one that I just downloaded to my folder under the scripts folder. And also, since I'm using Angular sanitize right now, I have a dependency. So Angular module built-in service app now depends on the ng sanitize. So in the square brackets in here, I need to make sure that I'm depending on ng sanitize. Okay, so this is important for us to refer to. And then I'm going to go ahead and save my file. And then down here, another thing that I'd like to add is that I'm going to add the display for the data, but instead of binding to it, I'm going to use the ng bind HTML, and that's why I had to add the ng sanitize, right? So in this case, ng bind dash HTML, and that ng bind HTML make it equal to the data that I was talking about. Okay, so in this case, I display the data through a simple binding like that, and here I use ng bind HTML, and then I display the data, and then I left the rest as is. Okay, so let's go ahead and save, and then let's open that in the browser. And as you can see, you see the data here, but you don't see that you see the test data being underlined, right? You don't see the actual characters being escaped. So the paragraph is a paragraph, the underlined text is underlined text, right? Everything is normal. But the other thing is, when you hover over test data, you don't see on mouse over. That's not taking place. Okay, so this is also an additional safety step taken by Angular to show you that you still cannot run the scripts. I will show you the HTML. That's pretty much what it's telling you, right? I will show you the HTML, and but I will strip away all the JavaScript that's available in there. So on mouse over still does not work. Okay, now one thing that you can do, and I'm not doing that right now in here. But one thing you can do, if you really want to use that HTML, you still use the ngBind HTML that I showed you. Okay, but your dependency in here, instead of being on sanitize, your dependency would be on SCE, right? So in the controller in here, in the controller you have built-in controller function. So in here you would, in addition to the scope, you use $SCE, right? And you depend on that, and then that will be injected into the controller, and then you can use trust as HTML. Okay, so the data in here, scope.data. So in here you would say, instead of the top one, you can say scope.data equal, let's say data 1, just for illustration purposes, equal, and then in this case you say $SCE, and then you say trust as HTML, and then whatever the value that you want in there. Okay, so you continue from there with that example. I prefer not to use trusting HTML, right? Because it will be an extremely rare case that you're trusting the HTML provided to you, but that's pretty much how you can do it using SCE, trust as HTML, and then you make sure that you inject that SCE in there. Okay, so that's how we can work with dangerous data. And now I need to move to other services. So thank you very much for listening. I'm Ayad Boudiab, and you have a good day.